So today I'm sitting down with Erran, who is the VP of Product and Engineering here at LinkedIn. And I'm here to pick his brain on everything that's AI, everything that's software engineering, from this very unique perspective where LinkedIn is one of the most remarkable tech companies, building machine learning, building personalization. Plus, you have a eagle-eye view of what's happening in the professional industry. So I'm super excited to talk to you about all of this.
Excited to talk about it.
So I think let's start with what you're building at LinkedIn, right? Like you're leading an entire engineering org. And I'm sure you would have had situations where you're thinking about, hey, where is this landscape moving? And somewhere a lot of people make it feel that all the software engineering roles are going to become AI engineering or AI native roles. What are your thoughts around that?
It's a great question. I think that it is probably true that every role in engineering and frankly every role in R&D needs to make the transition to become AI native. Mm-hmm. I think that the days where all the work that an employee does, whether it's truly creative work or kind of the more kind of repetitive toil work, is going to be affected by AI technology and AI tools in some way. And so at LinkedIn, with that acknowledgement, and especially within engineering at LinkedIn, we're diving headlong into this. And so we've run over the last 2 weeks 10 immersive day-long sessions where we're getting every single engineer on the team set up with Claude CLI, and they exit the day having shipped something through Claude CLI, because we believe, at least right now, as best as we can tell, like this is what engineering looks like. And then we're expecting that they leave those sessions and with changing the way that they work. And as we do this, as we change the way that software is written, of course, that's going to have lots of impact, in the R&D process before and in the R&D process after. But it's also going to change the way that we think about how we think about organizing teams and how we allocate work. And so as we get much further into adoption and productivity scales for all of our employees using these tools, we'll start reimagining in general how software engineering works at this company. And we're starting to see some things emerge and some patterns emerge, and then we'll just generalize it into best practices.
So Erran, I am very impressed with all the products that you've built around LinkedIn, whether it's the LinkedIn app or LinkedIn Learning or everything around it, right? What is your strategy, or like what's your unique way of approaching data and AI layers?
So I think one thing that sets us apart, especially today, is that we still, end to end run our entire full stack. So we're obviously have a very unique data asset in the economic graph with 1.3 billion members and 10 million companies and all the knowledge is being shared on our platform. But we also run our own data centers, deploying our own GPUs, fine-tuning and deploying our own models at scale. And that ability to integrate, to take a product vision that we have for our hiring assistant or our new AI-powered job search, and be able to start from that product vision and say, okay, how do we optimize every part of the stack down to the bare metal running in our data centers and everything in between, bringing one of the most unique data assets, certainly in the professional space, but arguably on the internet today, all together to solve that unique problem, enables us to develop experiences that few other companies, I think, can develop, because we have less constraints. We are not tied to what we can context engineer, because the data sits alongside where the models are running. We're not tied to the same type of necessarily compute constraints, because we can, again, optimize our own data centers for efficiency. Just unlocks so much for us. And we're seeing it in the end user results that we're seeing, again, for recruiters, for hiring managers, for job seekers, for people who are just using the LinkedIn consumer experience day in, day out. And again, we're just getting started being able to tap into kind of this full stack integration that we have.
That's pretty wonderful. I feel like your entire engineering playbook should be like out there on how you're like getting so many people work together and like have that end-to-end stack working optimally.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk about it a lot. We publish it on the engineering blog. I write about it on a platform. But again, this there are just not that many companies anymore. So many companies today. If you were a startup, the idea of running your own hardware is not even a thing that you consider. Yeah. And there's benefits to that, especially if you're trying to move quickly as a startup and just get a product to market. But I think that also eliminates a whole set of choices that you could make. And this is debatable, but in my opinion, the ability to fully tap into your differentiated assets, especially when it comes to data and, in our case, network.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. So, Erran, tell me more about the AI native builders program that you're doing here at LinkedIn.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of conviction that the future of building products is going to be one where any individual can take an idea and go all the way from idea to launch, every step in between. And we call that, this idea of full stack building. And we've started thinking about, historically, how we've had sub-specializations in terms of functions at every step. We've obviously had user researchers, and we've had designers, and we've had analysts, and we've had product managers, and even within engineering, we've had a bunch of sub-specializations, and every one of those steps to get a new feature out in production required somebody doing bespoke functional work and a handoff. And when you do that, inevitably, it's just the pace of being able to take an idea, production slows down, and in a world where especially now, the name of the game is velocity. Yeah. So that you can learn and you can iterate and understand how your users are responding to your products, and then feed that back into the development process. And that the tools are now at a point where somebody can, who despite them maybe being, have a background in engineering, can do design and can have access to amazing data assets through agents and to do analysis and can draft a spec and can go through the whole process is really powerful. It's really powerful and because it creates agency for that individual. They don't have to wait or depend on anybody else. The second they get that bug of an idea that they think is great, to go test it. And it's also amazing, obviously, for the business to be able to unleash, this type of velocity. And so we're starting to experiment with new ways of working, new ways of constructing teams, providing individuals with tools and greater agency to start kind of more independently going through this full spectrum of building that we call, like I said, full stack building. And like I said, I think that there will always be a place for the specialization. Because you will need somebody who knows what great code is, or great design is, or great product is. And so part of us figuring out how to operationalize full stack building at scale is also figuring out how to make sure that we continue to uphold the judgment and the craft for every one of these disciplines as we unleash, hopefully, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in R&D here at LinkedIn to have that agency to create amazing value for our members and customers.
That's wonderful. So I want to get your perspective. Like, I know LinkedIn itself has their own really, really large software engineering team, machine learning team. You're working on personalization. Plus, you have this huge professional network. So you get an eagle eye view of how not just roles at LinkedIn, but also like across multiple different companies are evolving. And you sort of get a good perspective on what software engineering job descriptions used to look like 5 years ago,
True.
What it looks like right now, and what would you recommend that people who are getting into software engineering, should they be thinking about becoming a AI or ML engineer, or what does that transition look like for them?
At its core, engineering, being a great engineer, requires a deep understanding of computer science. And regardless of whether AI is generating software, generating code, or humans are, the fundamental things that you have to account for, performance and efficiency, security, scalability, all of those things, and if you're a product engineer, usability and everything that goes into making a great product, all of those things remain.
Yeah.
And so, I still think that, that engineers and what it means to be engineers core has not changed. Now the tools that we use change. I think you see this in some ways, and the process by which we ship software changes. And so, obviously, this is really reflecting the tools we use. But if you take your example of an AI engineer, especially applied AI engineering and ML engineering at LinkedIn, used to be, if we were building a new recommender system or iterating an existing one, you were creating a bunch of handcrafted features. You were iterating on versions and of your current model architecture, experimenting with a next generation, and maybe now a lot of that is actually RAG and fine tuning and prompting, and context engineering, and investing in making in cognitive memory and making that available to off the shelf frontier models, right? Whether they're open source or available in the cloud. And so I think that some of the nature of some of the type of work that we would do and how we actually deliver that value is changing because the landscape's changing. But at the end of the day, the core principles, the foundations of software engineering, I think remaining the same. We're now, I think, operating with slightly different tools in a higher level.
Just something that you mentioned, right? Like the way that we're looking at software engineering fundamentally, the building blocks are still the same. But with the newer AI models, it feels like the level of autonomy or the level of complexity of what these models can solve. Earlier, it used to be that, hey, these coding models are never going to be so good that it takes over software engineering because, they don't have as much context. But sure, now we have a 1,000,000 token context window model. You can attach RAG to it. There's so many different ways that you can architect it that it's not just able to write code in the vanilla sense, but it can build apps. It can add security. I'm not a security expert, but then I can build an app. I can build something which has really tight security. And it somewhere makes front-end engineers or back-end engineers a full-stack engineer because the entry barrier to entry is very low.
Yep.
So I feel every 6 months when there's a new model that comes out, somebody says that this is probably it, beyond this, the models can't get better beyond this. They can't architect. You need humans to think about system design. But I feel like a year later, 2 years later, even system design can be done by these AI models. So what is your perspective on what's the saturation point of models and where do humans come in?
It's anybody's guess where kind of the upper bound of the capability of the current kind of generation of model architectures are going to take us and what that means for how all professionals do work, engineers included but not limited. My belief is that human judgment is still incredibly important, and there's a long runway to go before we get to the point where agents can be trusted completely autonomous without human judgment and human in the loop to make sure that the models are making the right choices. So as an example, we have, we're really wanting to unleash a lot of people at this company to be able to tap into, using agentic tools to generate PRs. Lots of people who maybe aren't even engineers are doing it, and we have them taking their ideas and just running and feeling kind of somewhat unencumbered because they no longer have a dependency on the engineering team. And what we're finding is, while we're seeing the throughput of these PRs go way up, and at the surface, for a non-expert, the quality of the code seems fine. When you dig in, it's not actually taking it, for whatever reason, maybe not supply the right context, maybe because limitations of the model, not actually generating fully shippable code on its own that we could just let pass through. And so I think that this core human in the loop judgment, the things that I think we're really well suited for doing, is changing. The actual details of how that job gets done, or it's staying the same. The actual details of how that gets done, I think, is changing.
I feel like LinkedIn is, I've said this before, right? It's in a very unique position where you're not just a tech company, but you're leading the professional network out there. You're sort of like the go-to spot for any professional who's looking for a job, any companies who are trying to hire the best talent. And somewhere along the way, I see this narrative going around in the industry that AI has killed SaaS, AI has killed software engineering. Companies are laying off tons and tons of software engineers. And somewhere this creates a lot of, I feel like, misunderstanding, chaos, and not giving the right direction to the next wave of new generation of engineers coming out, right? You're leading such a huge engineering team. Do you ever get these kind of fears, or like how do you react to it?
Yeah, I mean, so we're all human at the end of the day, and obviously we're living in this moment of like tremendous change, which inevitably is going to create a lot of anxiety and people and companies reacting it in a particular way. And I think we're like squarely in the messy period before we get to some stabilization. And so I think the best advice that I give to my own employees, that I speak about on the platform, is certainly the future is an AI native one. Because my belief that human judgment still and craft and ownership still plays a tremendously important role in the future of software engineering, and the thing that has differentiated the best engineers through all history are those skills and probably productivity. I think productivity goes away now, as long as you immerse yourself deeply in the tools themselves. It's really volatile to be a software engineer right now. So to your point, every 3 months, every 6 months, a new tool emerges. Do not get married to one particular way of doing things. Stay abreast of what the emerging trends are. Dabble and explore and use what works best for you and what your peers are doing. And then be ready that like 3 or 6 months from now, that's going to change. And if you have that mindset and you hold on to the craft, focus on systems thinking and kind of the pure computer science part of the job, I think you're going to be just fine in the limit. And actually, I think what will happen is all this productivity improvement is going to enable companies like ours to just do more, create more value, and scale and tap into the capabilities of this next generation of engineers.
I absolutely loved what you said, and I definitely want to double tap on that, because this is a common issue that a lot of people are facing. Is at times when you're working in your 9 to 5, you're wearing blinders and you're sort of like deeply into one tech stack, or like using a particular tool, and once you get out of that burrow, you're like, wow, like the world has moved. There's like 25 different new models and like tools and new frameworks, like agentic frameworks, or like an A to A protocol. There's so much happening in this space that somewhere it feels like being a specialist can work against you. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's always going to be room for specialists. So like it's kind of interesting, even if I zoom out from engineering overall, the idea of craft and taste making and knowing what looks good, whether it's in engineering or design or product, requires specialization. And so I don't think specialization is going to go away. I think the manifestation of it, like what does it mean to be a specialist and what are the work artifacts, they will change. I'm no longer as a specialist software engineer in infrastructure necessarily am hand coding low-level C++ because I have an agent to do that. Yeah. But I'm designing the system still and I'm figuring out how they fit together. I think if you zoom out to just R&D in general, we like to talk about, we've talked about over the last year plus about this notion of this AI age ushering this notion of a full stack builder. That you can go from an idea to shipping something in production and all the steps in between, the user research, the analysis, creating the product spec, the design, and then building the feature. I think that is true. The tools enable us to do this. But just because an engineer can now go and use a tool like Lovable or Replit to create a design doesn't mean it's an amazing design that is going to feel intuitive and is going to fit and be coherent with the rest of the product experience and meet the user's needs and all the things that are really about taste making and user experience design. Yeah. Doesn't mean that even if I could do that, that there's a market opportunity there that is large enough that's worth pursuing. That takes real craft of understanding opportunities and market and everything else. And so you still need the specialists with domains of expertise and years of expertise and frankly just a sense of like inert internal sense of what great looks like in the future, even if the roles and functions are going to change, whether that's within engineering or across different parts of R&D.
You've mentioned a lot about user experience, right? But the way the entire tech stack or like the product is moving towards, it feels like of course there will be always some products which is designed for humans to use, but there is a lot of products which is designed for agents to use. So like the entire SEO was becoming AEO,
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts in where that industry is moving, and like has there been any best practices? Has there been any progress in a phase where this is how a good product would look like? Because it's not interfacing with humans, but it's not a user interface, it's agent interface.
I feel like this entire interview has been about predicting what the most like unpredictable period of our entire, my entire career has been like. So I will hazard a guess here, but with all the caveats, obviously that need to be applied. I mean, I think I have a couple thoughts on this. One, while certainly the modality of people, we're starting to see this amazing emergence of an ability through text, through voice, to be able to interact with agents and they go and operate autonomously to do work on our behalf it's here, and it's only going to scale up. And what these agents can do is only scale up. I think we also have to zoom out and realize that like actually much of humanity today is not using these tools and are still using user interfaces. And there's a long way to go for companies like ours to incorporate these capabilities in a way that is useful and intuitive for that, for the 1.3 billion professionals we have on the platform. And if you're thinking about technology more broadly, for the billions of people on the planet. So I think that we'll get there, but there is how that transformation happens. I think there's a whole story that's yet to be told. And I think that part of that transformation has to be a moment where traditional UXs and agentic UXs work in a complementary way. Sometimes I want to be able to just issue a command to an agent, and sometimes I want to just immerse myself in UX because for whatever task I'm trying to accomplish, maybe traditional UX better, but they need to talk to each other. So I think that transformation and how it plays out will take time, and I don't think we know exactly. That's one. Two, I think we also have to acknowledge that just like the mobile transformation before, we saw a decade ago, and I was here kind of firsthand building and ushering the mobile transformation at LinkedIn, even when we were at, single-digit percentage points of engagement, of our share of engagement happening on mobile, knowing that we needed to completely reorient the company. Everything we built from having reviews of product specs and designs had to be mobile first because that was the future. I think we're in a similar moment now. And so what we need to do for every product we ship is ask the question you just asked me, which is, how does this feature work in an agent-first world?
Yeah.
Sure, yes, it's got to exist in our traditional UXs, and that's where most of our usage works now. But how do we make it so that, our user, even if they're not on LinkedIn.com, they're interacting with whatever their personal professional agent is, trying to apply for a job or stay up to date about what's going on in their professional areas of interest, or hire somebody or market their B2B products, can do it directly through the agentic interface they're doing. Well, we've got to make sure that all of our capabilities at some point in some way are exposed through MCP. And we need to make sure that we have agents on our side that can communicate with agents on the outside world via A2A. So I think that these types of fundamental questions in the product development process are starting to emerge. And we also need to lay the foundations to make it easy. So not every team has to think about, well, how do I expose my particular slice of the LinkedIn universe as a skill that might be usable by a LinkedIn agent or an external agent?
Yeah. No, 100% agreed to that. You speak a lot about AI native builders, right? Do you somewhere feel that the interview process, the technical interviews especially for software engineers or AI engineers, whatever, Dash engineers, have not changed?
Things are changing.
Okay.
Even at LinkedIn, demonstrating that our candidates can use AI coding tools, AI development tools, is a key part of the evaluation process. And again, it's so tricky, right? We're all reformulating what it means to be an engineer full-time here, right? And at every company in the space. And so you have to have a certain level of conviction about what engineer is going to look like so that you can, in your hiring process, evaluate for those things. So right now, 100%, we're well beyond the point where like we acknowledge that being comfortable with these tools is something that every engineer has to do. We've evolved our interview process, but we need to start being agile about the feedback loops.
A lot of the things that you mentioned, right? Like whether it's around taste, whether it's around decision making, whether it's around system thinking, it does seem like that's going to be the differentiator between somebody who's a mediocre software engineer using AI tools to code. What are your perspective on like what should a software engineer be focusing on to be on the top 1%?
I think it's table stakes to be proficient in the tools. And I think just like even today, or in the prior generation of software development tools, you saw kind of a productivity gap between the people who really knew how to fully utilize a tool set and how to piece different parts of the tool set together to optimize a workflow. The same will be true with these AI tools. I think in some ways that concept is not changing, but the way it manifests because the tools are different is changing. And so I think that certainly is going to, the people who can harness these tools to be most productive, I think is one thing. But the things that, again, I feel like maybe I'm a little broken record here. The things that have always set the best engineers apart is folks who are tremendous problem solvers, who could, and we all know them, that know, as the problems became more complex, of greater scale, they could reason about the entire space and come up with elegant, simple solutions that were performant or efficient and were secure and all the things that we care about in engineering. And so I think that skill that has always differentiated great engineers will remain. This has always been a differentiator, and it is entirely possible. The people who are amazing at that wind up being the individuals that really thrive, because productivity, the floor of productivity is going to go up for everybody.
Yeah. Erran, I often see people telling everyone widely, like everyone should learn AI, everyone should learn AI. And I get so many people asking me, especially on LinkedIn platform, like, people pinging me saying that I'm an insurance professional. I'm a product marketer who is not in a tech field. What does learn AI mean for me? I feel there is a lot of confusion where the narrative is to make everyone a builder, which may or may not necessarily be true. So what is your perspective of tangential roles or tangential industries, which is not AI building or not tech?
Yeah.
How should AI learning look for them?
I mean, I think in every job, we are going to see AI play a larger and larger role in productivity and the tools that all professions use, especially skilled professions, but even I think in the trades. This notion of learning AI is not what the meaning behind it is not what we would have meant 8-10 years ago. It's like, okay, well, you need to understand the fundamentals, to your point, of how neural networks work and various model architectures. And I think it is about understanding how to use the tools that are harnessing AI to make yourself more productive. And so I think that will be universal. And so we all use, ironically, it's so funny. Everybody uses search, web search, Google search, Bing search, whatever your search engine of choice is. That is an AI product. It's always been an AI product. They're using AI without realizing it. If you're using Copilot or Gemini or Claude, those are to help you in your professional life. Those are AI tools. That's what it means to use AI. That doesn't mean you need to go and be an AI engineer who's building the next generation of frontier model. So I think that the way that I would advise, the folks who are asking those questions is to, like I said, for engineers here, the future of your work is going to look dramatically different because of those tools. Spend some of your time exploring and experimenting, even if it's with the GPTs, Copilots of the world.
Well, thank you so much, Erran. It was lovely chatting with you. There is so many tidbits that I learned from you, and I'm just going to summarize everything, put everything together as a resource that people can refer to later.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ash.
Thank you so much.